Tonks, and this is TJ Bliss. TJ is the Director of Assessment for the state of Idaho and received a PhD in Evaluation, EIME, and he can tell you what that means if you really want to know, from Brigham Young University.
And Elena is, we agreed to introduce each other.
Oh.
Elena is at Mountain Heights Academy, formerly the Open High School of Utah. So it's Mountain Heights Academy, the Open High School, Utah. Yeah, that's your tag. That's great. And Elena and I worked together on a couple of reports for the International Association of K-12 Online Learning, related to OER, both policy and developing OER. So the goal of today's presentation is to tell you about those reports. You can go and read them, give you a quick overview, and hopefully spend time answering questions because you can read the reports yourselves. You don't have to have us tell you about them, but we will. That's fine. And also to get you thinking about how some of these policies, we talk about the policy in K-12, how that can transfer to your situation, whether you're in an institution of higher education, a different kind of government, at a school, whatever your situation might be. I think there's some opportunity for transfer. So we're going to get to some recommendations, some policy recommendations. I've also provided you with some tweet ideas on each slide, so you don't have to think about what to tweet. You can pay attention to what we're talking about. So they're up there. Okay. So here are the two reports. The first one is the OER State Policy and K-12 Education Report, which I'll talk about. And then there's the Open Education Resources and Collaborative Content Development Report, which is a guide for those interested in collaborating with others to develop content or adopt content. And they're snazzy blue covers. Those are on the iNACOL website, inacol.org, under reports. You can find those, and I'll probably send out a tweet showing you where those are as well sometime. So here is what the policy report looks like and the sections that it covers. Just very briefly, there's an introduction to OER because this is intended to be used by policymakers. I understand that the Washington Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, OSPI, in Washington uses this report in their communication efforts, probably with policymakers, I'm assuming.
Actually, it's going out to districts statewide, just for folks that are
Districts
trying to
are
communicate
policymakers.
with their stakeholders about.
Cool.
Awesome.
So there's a good introduction to OER there, succinct. Benefits of OER is a really good section to use. And then some models of state policy. It's not every state policy, but these are state level policies in K-12 OER. Nothing about higher ed here. Nicole covered that really well today. There's a lot going on in higher ed, not so much in K-12, but there is something going on there, and it's important to pay attention to. They are categorized not into Nicole's 4 fancy categories, but into TJ's fancy 3 categories around creation, adoption, and access. All right? And then a section on barriers and opportunities for OER policy. And then finally, what everybody's waiting for, those OER policy recommendations that come out of those models. So here is a fabulous, absolutely wonderful, it's a stunning graphic by Delana Tonks. It's openly licensed. You can use it anywhere you want, anytime you want, anyhow you want. You can even change it. Covers the benefits of OER. I'm not going to go through all of those because I think people in this audience know those, and they're covered in depth in the report. But there's lots of them, and it depends on where you are, which ones are more beneficial to you or more applicable. So let's just go over quickly. I want to just cover really quickly the different state models. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, 1 or 2 sentences on each state, just so you have an idea of what they are. And again, in those 3 categories of creation, adoption, and access. And there is the fancy animation. All right. So Washington, I think, is an important state to start with. They're kind of the vanguard in OER policy, and perhaps the most progressive OER policy when it comes to the creation of content and the allocation of resources. This would fall under Nicole's category of allocation of resources toward OER. And in Washington, there was a bill passed by the legislature actually funding an open course library or something like it in K-12, similar to the bill that was funded for the community colleges. And I think, are you paid for on that bill? So we have actually living evidence right here, manifestation of that policy in action. And there's a lot of work that you're doing. So all the work that you do here, Barbara, what's her name? What's your last name, Barbara? Suits is working on development of OER in Washington for K-12. and it's funded by the policy that was passed there around the creation of OER. So, Pictionary and Cranium come from Washington. Virginia has a policy that allows for educators to use an open license on materials that they develop. And it's not just educators, it's actually all government employees in Virginia. And so it's kind of broad, but it covers the education community as well. And they also have implemented some policies that allow for some oversight over OER activities. And I don't know much more about where Virginia has gone on that. They didn't actually put money toward OER development, so you don't hear a lot about what's going on there, but the policy is there. Did you have an update on?
Yeah, I'm actually on that committee, joint committee.
What's it called again?
The
committee.
It's the Joint Committee on Technology and Broadband.
Okay. So it got renamed from when the policy was written.
Right. And it's model in California to create 50 of the most popular high-level classes, create 50 textbooks around that. And it's still stewing, and it's going to be back on the agenda in the next session.
Cool.
But there's no money.
So stay tuned. Let's see what they can
So
do.
there's talk and there's interest in this issue, and but again, I'm not sure they really fully support.
Well, we'll get in there. You'll get in there.
We're gonna do it.
Awesome. So Virginia's awesome. It's great work. So watch what's going on there and see what can come out of it. Utah, that's where we are now, passed a similar policy to Virginia's, though very, very specific to educators because it was passed by the State Board of Education in Utah. It is practicing good copyright hygiene. It gives educators the opportunity and go ahead to say anything you create can be openly licensed, meaning you own the copyright, teacher. The school doesn't own it, the district doesn't own it, the state doesn't own it, you own it. So if you want to put an open license on it, go ahead. It allows for places like Mountain Heights Academy, the Open High School of Utah, to openly license all their content without any problem from the state saying, well, yeah, we made that, so you have to license it how we want. It has to be copyrighted by Utah or something weird like that. And that's really what that's going. That has allowed for a lot of initiatives to go forward in Utah, but that's the policy in Utah around the creation of content. This policy removes barriers to creation of open content. That's what these kinds of policies do. So, coming back to this slide again, let's talk about policies in adoption. There's one specifically in this category, and that's Texas. Texas passed a policy, so Texas has really rigorous guidelines around their content lists in K-12. I mean, to get a book on the curriculum list in Texas is an ordeal. It takes time, it takes advocacy, it takes going through the process of getting it approved and reviewed and all that. And actually, there are specific publishers included on that list. So up until the bill that was passed in Texas, you actually couldn't put OER on approved curriculum lists in Texas. So that bill changed that. No money funded towards anything, but it allowed for the adoption of OER. It doesn't have a lot of teeth in it, but it is a start. And so there was also policy included in that bill, or maybe a different one, that basically says if a faculty member from a Texas publicly funded university creates content, it can automatically be placed on the list without review. So that's an avenue for, if you can get faculty to develop OER and then just say, get it on the list. They don't have to go through any onerous process to get it on the list. They can just get it on the list. Then it's a matter of getting it out into the schools. That's a whole other ballgame. Yeah?
So if we were on the faculty at Texas and we grabbed something from Utah and then tweaked it, then they would accept it without question, right?
Ooh.
I'm sorry.
Right.
Just thinking a second.
Very, very intriguing idea.
Oh, okay.
So that's really the only one I have in the category of adoption of my 5 models that I'm showing you. There are probably others out there now too. Lastly, access. OER policy, state policies around access. There's the one in Maine, which basically it reallocated money toward the encouragement of the use of OER in Maine. And not just OER, it's bigger and broader than that. It's about digital material and digital content. But there are provisions and clauses in there related to OER. I think there's a definition of what OER is. So it also allowed for restructuring within the Department of Education in Maine to fund things related to OER. So that's that is important. I don't know how it's going there. I never talked to anybody in Maine, and I haven't gotten an update on it. But just be aware that there's things going on in Maine. This is really high level and really short, and you can read more about Maine in the report. But just some examples of these different kinds of state policies. Now, there are other state OER initiatives, some of them state policy driven, some of them completely absent of any state policy. Certainly there are internal policies going on with the groups. Minnesota is a good example of a state that's doing really great things in K-12 OER without any sort of input from the Department of Education in Minnesota or the legislature. But they've come together kind of organically, and there's a big movement there. You can find, if you go look on the iNACOL, they just had their conference last week. There was a presentation from the people in Minnesota. You can learn more about the OER initiative in Minnesota. Is anybody from Minnesota?
No, I was at their presentation. It was actually.
Yeah, so talk to Sarah if you want to know more. She can even guide you to that. And other states, we talked about California. There is some K-12 policy there in Florida, in New York, in Oregon, and this is Maryland, if you don't know. And so there are things, and there's a table in the report kind of giving a brief synopsis of the kind of policies related to OER. Some of them are more generic, again, to digital learning and digital technology, but there are OER-related elements in there.
Did you survey the state departments about it to get the information? Or
Some of them, and then we use the OER Policy Registry that Creative Commons has. Shout out, there he is, Cable. So a lot of these policies are on the OER Policy Registry. You can actually access them directly. I watched Cable Green testify before the Washington legislature. I talked to Cable Green to learn about the Washington policy. I maybe even talked to Carl about some of that in Washington. So the main people, for example, I didn't get a chance to talk to about those policies, but yeah, a lot of these are in the policy registry. So there may be others out there that aren't on the registry as well that need to be looked at. So there are some barriers to OER policy itself. The example in Texas is you can pass a policy to allow something, but unless you're investing in marketing and strategy, for instance, unless you're paying for somebody to go sit down with a principal and say, hey, you really should take a look at this book, which is actually what the publishers do in Texas. Because Texas is really Texas and California are where the publishers send their people. And they'll sit down with individual principals and say, hey, here's a really great book, and they'll go through it and say, you really should buy this. We don't really do that. We don't have the funding to do that usually in our OER initiatives. And those are kind of a composite barrier to policy. So my time is getting close. I want to give Delaney time to talk about the collaborative guide. There are lots of opportunities for OER policy. Cable this morning talked about policy windows. There's a great wide open policy window in the United States right now around Common Core. Common standards. There's a great need for curriculum and content aligned to the Common Core, and there's a huge dearth of it. For some reason, the publishers are not jumping to update all their content and resell it. I'm actually shocked by that, but they're not. So they're leaving this wide open. Personalized learning is another opportunity. There's a big movement on that, and there's actually a lot of money going towards personalized learning. And then the cost savings provide an opportunity. Depending on who you're talking to, some of these are more intriguing than others. So here are the policy recommendations, some of them from the report, that can be transferred to your situation. Number one, understand the moral imperative that Cable talked about this morning of public funds used to create content. The content created using public funds should be openly licensed. Using standardized licensing, so use Creative Commons because that has the legal backing and you can track that. Make sure that OER are allowed and included on curriculum lists, whether it's school or state level, policies around that. Increasing the flexibility of instructional materials budget. Sometimes it's your instructional materials budget that prevents you from doing things that make sense. You're tied into this or that or the other. Establishing quality review processes for OER. That's important as well, and that can be done through policy. Including OER in PD programs. We talked about all that Creative Commons is doing to educate people. Well, you can include that in your PD budgets, for instance. You're at a state level or at a school level. And then supporting OER specialist positions, like they've done in Washington, was a recommendation we highly recommend. And then funding digital devices can have some ancillary benefits. So, lastly, some policy P's and Q's. This is my mantra. Policies should solve problems, not create them.
Here, here. Back in there.
Yeah, so I define policy a little different than I think Nicole defined it this morning. My definition of policy is this: a solution to a problem. That's what a policy should be. If it's not that, then it's probably still a policy, but it's a bad one. Practice good copyright hygiene. Again, I take that from Cable. I think you said that at some point in the past. Maybe you say it all the time. But that means understand copyright. Don't just ignore it. Don't not have anything that says what your policies are around copyright. And then understand the different levels of transfer policies. These state level policies can transfer to your situations. And then here's a thought for you to think about while Delana starts talking to you. How do these things transfer to your particular context, these recommendations?
Okay, got that? All right, I'm just going to talk very briefly to you about the Guide to Collaborative OER Development. We talked about recreating the wheel. There are lots of places out there that are creating OER, open educational resources, and if you are looking to partner with somebody who is doing the same thing, or you're interested in leveraging what somebody else has already done, I highly recommend this guide for you to take a look at. It reviews what OER is, the benefits, how to approach OER policy, whether you should build or buy. That's a huge consideration, because I will tell you a little dirty secret about OER. It's not free. There's a cost in human capital to develop it, to curate it, to maintain it, to tweak it, in human capital and in human talent. So there are some kind of considerations to make there. Best practices for collaboration. We put together a checklist, a step-by-step guide and a checklist to make sure that when you are collaborating, you know whether it's effective or not. We've included a sample MOU. Who knows what an MOU is? Okay, Memorandum of Understanding. It outlines who does what, who's responsible for doing what. So if people move in and out of the organization, you have one contract, essentially, that delineates that.
What was the first word?
I'm sorry?
Memorandum.
Mm-hmm.
Another word is contract.
Yeah,
Yes.
MOA or MOA.
Right.
Yes. So here are the steps for starting a successful collaboration. You want to do a readiness assessment, assess potential partnerships, review the shared vision and values. You want to make sure that you have the same vision and values, the expectations, and then the rules of engagement. And if you can do all 5 of those successfully, then you will be able to collaborate successfully. One thing I want to mention very briefly here, stakeholders. Know your audience. If you go speak to your legislature, are they going to want to hear warm, fuzzy stories? Maybe a couple, but what are they mostly concerned with?
Constituents.
Money and what their constituents think. Will I get voted back into office? So know your audience when you go and talk to people about OER. Okay? So success depends on a lot of advanced preparation and consideration. So you want to be that guy, not so much that guy. So when I was pregnant, I got a wild hair and decided I had to paint the nursery that day. And so I went, I got the paint. All of you moms in the room know what I'm talking about. I was nesting, whatever. So I went and got the paint, I painted it, and I woke up in the morning and I was so thrilled because I got this beautiful cream color, about like this. I went in and the room was orange. It was orange. And I couldn't tell that in the light when I painted it. So I wish that I had taken the time to prepare and paint a little patch on the wall to see what it would look like during daylight hours. So don't be me. Do this and make sure that you put some preparation into it. Don't find somebody here and tomorrow jump into a partnership with that. Okay, potential partnerships. I would love for you to think outside the box and consider a variety of partnerships. There are some big heavy-duty players in the OER arena, both in higher ed and in K-12. There are also some smaller ones, so take a look at everybody who's out there and determine if that would be a potential partnership for you or not. I think in some ways it would be really nice to have a matchmaker website for OER, right?
Yes.
Like match.com
Yes.
or something like that, where you could say, in search of OER for U.S. history and I enjoy long walks on the beach, or something to that effect. So if anybody's looking for an idea, something that they can do, there you go, you're welcome. Okay, shared vision. So my husband and I, we trade off planning our anniversaries every year. We get married in 1992, fast forward to 1998. He plans our anniversary. We live in Columbus, Ohio. We are going to a Reds baseball game. An hour and a half away in Cincinnati. 9-month-old who was not feeling well. So I'm just saying, when we got there, our anniversary was spent with me crouched on a beer-stained floor trying to comfort my screaming child, not really what I had envisioned for my 6th anniversary. So make sure that your vision in your head is the same one that all of your other stakeholders have. We want to make sure that we're on the same page. Now, he did make up for that, by the way, for our 20-year anniversary. He surprised me and took me to New York City for 3 days without any children, so that was awesome. Okay, expectations. Adjusting expectations appropriately is critical to solid collaboration. This is a process, and it takes time and lots of conversations to flesh out what's in your head and what is in everybody else's head to make sure that you're on the same page. A lot of people are looking for plug-and-play solutions with OER, and I really think that that's counterintuitive to the whole purpose of OER. The freedom and the liberation that you get from taking little puzzle pieces and putting them together to make whatever you want is lost in translation when you're looking for a plug-and-play solution. So keep that in mind when you're working with potential partners. Okay, our TJ and I presented last weekend at the Virtual School Symposium in Florida, and our entire presentation has been uploaded into my SlideShare account. If you want all the slides for all the rest of the presentation, that's where you can find it. There's a best practices checklist that you're going to want to take into consideration. You need to identify the need, the players, the plan, manage the project, and decide what the roles are going to be. Identify results, elements of quality content. You want to recruit for the roles that you're looking for and make sure you have the right talent in the right place to accomplish your objectives. You're going to select a governance model, identify your assets, agree on a content license, and then identify content creation tasks. So that's kind of your rubric that you can use as you go through this development phase. And that brings us to our questions and our answers. What questions can we answer for you?
Where are your slides at? Are they on SlideShare as well?
Yeah, I need to take a minute this afternoon to look them up. Why don't you go to my website, tjbliss.org, because that's easy.
Okay.
I'll put up, if I don't have a page for presentations, there will be one soon. And then,
Elena Thomas on SlideShare.
yeah, SlideShare. I do have a SlideShare account, so you can search there as well. I'll probably upload them there.
And I'll put this presentation on SlideShare today as well for you. So
You say Delana what? Delana.
yeah. Oh, Tonks, T-O-N-K-S.
Like in Harry
Harry
Potter.
Potter. But my hair's not purple.
Any other questions? Did we cover everything so well? Yes.
I just wonder, just because it's my research interest for now, do you have any very good solid evidence that OER might improve the quality of education at schools?
That's a really good question. Question about whether OER improved the quality of education. I mean, from a research standpoint, that's a very difficult question to answer. And so there's some research coming out that I'll tell you about in 1 minute from a school district here in Utah. It's actually the school district I grew up in, Nebo School District. And the Open Education Group at BYU has submitted a publication to Education Ed Researcher. It's in review right now, and they're resubmitting. So that's really good, so it'll hopefully get accepted. But they were asking this question: what impact did having teachers use open textbooks, for instance, just open textbooks, have on student learning in terms of their statewide test scores? And there actually was a significant positive effect on student learning, but it was very small. And it wasn't the biggest piece of variance either in the effect on student learning. So the real question is, how can OER be used to impact student learning? Could it be that by using OER, resources can be allocated to something else that can impact learning? That's a really important question to ask. Can it be that if you use OER in place of the textbook that has to sit on the shelf and can't leave the classroom, and you also couple it with teaching kids how to use resources and take notes and highlight, and you build exercises and worksheets into those things, can that be the thing that impacts them? So when you ask, can OER itself impact learning? I think that OER can be a mediator of other factors that have been shown to impact learning. And that's where I hope the research goes, is what are those other factors that help impact learning? Really good question. Did you want to follow up on that?
No, well, I mean, you answered it. I mean, you can take any publisher's textbook, rip the copy or write page out of it. It's an open book, kind of. It shouldn't have any impact on learning. It's textbook's a textbook. So there should be no reason why having an open license on a textbook should impact learning meaningfully in any way. If the
Unless it's
textbooks
a
are the same
digital,
quality.
unless it's.
No, so then there's all sorts of other things, right? So I'm totally for open
Yeah.
content, through and through, and but it's a great opportunity to create meaningful communities of practice where people engage in a safe environment. They know they can adapt the resources. They know they can share them back. There's a safe social framework for sharing. There's a safe legal framework for sharing. All of this stuff, people start to kind of converse, think about how they might teach, change their practices better.
Here's another one to think about.
We actually have to stop right there.
We're stopped.
But if you want to continue this
Professional
conversation,
development.
continue outside.
Yeah, totally. Communities of
Development.
practice.
All these other things, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.